Welcome, everyone. It is really good to be back. This is the newest season of the Art Block
We're
podcast.
back, baby.
Yeah. Of
Yay.
course, my name is Luis Antonio Pichardo, founder and executive director of DSTL Arts. DSTL Arts, the nonprofit arts mentorship organization that inspires, teaches, and hires emerging artists from underserved communities. And as usual, I am accompanied by my lovely co-host, Abraham Jaramillo. Say what's up, Abraham.
What's up?
And today we have someone that we're very proud to be calling our spring 2025 teaching artist intern, Miss Jamie Choi. Jamie, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for having me as a first guest on the podcast. I don't know. I'm not too super sure what to expect, but I'm just excited to be part of the recording process. So, yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. And of course, like I said, this is, kind of us introducing you as our 2025 spring intern. As a teaching artist intern, Jamie will be working with us as a team to develop, some workshops that we'll be discussing, obviously, during the podcast. But Jamie is no stranger to the DSTL Arts world. Jamie is also, in fact, a poet artist mentee in our poet artist development program, or the PAD program, as we so funnily name it. Acronym wise, we love our acronyms here at DSTL Arts. But like I said, happy to have you here as our first guest of the new season. And I guess to maybe introduce yourself to the arts fam out there listening and watching, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what brings you to DSTL Arts?
Okay. So my name is Jamie Choi. My legal name is Jeongmin Choi. But I normally go by Jamie. She, her pronouns, and I am a 1.5 generation Korean living in Tongvaland. And I am a writer. I'm a longtime writer now. I've been writing for quite a bit, like casually and on a more professional capacity, so to speak. And yeah, like what brings me to DSTL Arts is basically I happen to hear about DSTL Arts through the grapevine of my friends. So one of my friends kind of recommended the program to me. So it was like a word of mouth kind of situation. Not not because the friend was in the program, but they just had recommended it to me. And so I applied, and then I got into the program, and then just things just kept rolling because the whole point of the PAD program is specifically is to publish a chapbook at the end. So I ended up publishing my chapbook, Disappearing from View, through DSTL Arts. And yeah, now I'm here on the podcast. So that's basically my story as to how I got here.
Nice. I just because I noticed that you have your name Young Min.
Yeah.
I actually Googled what it means, and it comes from the Korean name, right?
Honestly, it's been a while since I've kind of thought about the meaning of it, but Choi is obviously a surname from my dad, and then Jung means I believe it means to be calm, maybe. Don't at me.
Yes,
Don't at me.
I have it. Don't worry. Don't worry.
Because honestly, I might be butchering that. There might be Korean people out what are you talking about? So okay, Min is I believe Min means to be quick, to be busy or something, something related to being what do you call it? Keeping busy, or being on the move or something like that. It's an interesting addition, but it's actually a unisex name in Korea.
Yes.
So it's I there's a famous actor actually in Korea whose name is also Jeongmin, and yeah, so, and I think it's fitting that my name Jeongmin is like unisex, and then Jamie is also unisex. That was like sort of a cool like little transition that I made. It's like not really like something I necessarily chose, but it kind of just stuck because I think it is like it does suit me and my personality. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I found it fascinating. This is like the
Jamie.
significant. That's the purity, honesty, righteousness, and then we have mean that would translate to people,
Yeah.
nation, or masses, and together basically
So
encapsulates the idea of virtuous individuals dedicated to
so
serving the community and upholding righteousness.
oh
I was like,
okay.
"Ooh, that's a cool. Yeah, that's right on the money."
Yeah, so sometimes like the letters might sound one way, but depending on the actual like letter being used, it might be a different meaning. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure if the min is the is the same one because there's probably a one or two different ones there. So
Yeah,
I
it's a
don't
cool
know
concept.
my
Yeah.
because like Korean names, like if it's like done traditionally, have like Chinese characters, so to speak, is the roots are like it's like a whole thing. But like the Chinese characters have like a way of it being like pronounced, I guess, like when it's like pronounced in Korean or English, I guess. Um, it's like sounds like the same, but then if the letter itself, if you look at it, would be a different meaning and things like that. So it's not I'm not too sure because I don't know how to actually spell it in that form.
Yeah,
So
the
yeah.
way I found out, it's just Google. Google helps me a lot.
I know Google can be misleading though, so
That
I
too,
just
yeah, too, yeah.
not clear. Like I'm not claiming to know things. I'm just saying what I know from what I grew up as, like, what how I grew up and what I've been told about these things. Yeah.
But
And
yeah, and that's I think fair,
Yeah.
like for I was actually having this conversation with my girlfriend yesterday about the use of like the ñ in
Mm,
surnames or in first names, that kind of
yeah.
thing in Spanish related names, right? And then also the use of the accent marks over the I's, E's, etc. And
Yeah.
um, kind of going off track here a little bit, but with like Zoe Saldana, who, right now at least was kind of criticized, I guess, by other Latinos for not having the ñ in her last name, Saldana. Traditionally speaking, in Mexican or not Mexican, Spanish surnames, it would be Saldaña. But I was like, that's
Oh,
unfair. That's such an unfair thing to like criticize a person over because especially in the history of the US, a lot of times those types of like orthographic marks were dropped from our names.
yeah.
yeah, especially
Yeah.
when you're doing documentation,
Yeah,
sometimes it doesn't even has to be a word that's not in the keyboard.
yeah,
Back then, not keyboard, but like,
I don't
and they
think,
still
yeah.
they have mistakes, right? Like, so I can see that. But sometimes, like artists change their names to make it
Mhm.
themselves more appealing for like a broader range of
Yeah, to
people, right?
assimilate,
So
basically.
yeah,
yeah.
so I don't know.
Yeah. And I think, at least like talking about your name and how you grew up understanding your name, I think that that's also a very personal, deeply personal thing. So uh,
Yeah.
I appreciate the fact that like, you actually, understand from your own personal experience what your name means and how you personally relate with it. I think that that's
My like vague recollection after having it explained to me when I was young,
yeah.
it's too young to kind of like be like, okay, yeah, that's what it means. Like just
Well,
like I need to like ask again what it means because yeah, that's a refresher I would need. But
mhm,
yeah, names are really interesting when you start digging into them, into
totally.
the meaning.
Yes, I love looking like at the names that I'm like, oh, I never heard that one before, and I just go
Yeah.
into like a rabbit hole sometimes, and I find cool
Yeah.
things about them. Especially people who like haven't figured out what like sometimes people don't really are interested so much. So when they find out, oh, that's totally me, or they're like, no, that's not me. So it's a cool like because your name kind of sometimes in a way kind of represents you too. So it's like a weird like finding out like does it really represent me or not?
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
good
And
to.
just wanted to get
Because
back
like,
into a little bit of you, Jamie, and just talking
yeah.
about like your experiences. So I noticed that you wrote about a loud car enthusiast in your book. And I wonder, like, a lot of writers get like writing from experience, right? So I
Yeah.
wanted to like ask you, like, from the places you have lived, like apartment, mansion, castles, I don't know, do you have a cool
Yeah.
story of a place that you
Huts.
have lived?
Yeah. So are we talking about like basically that specific experience? Because we all have like neighbors, and like typically, right, unless you're living literally like in a house like in the middle of nowhere with no neighbors, which is also scary in its own way, but like in LA especially, most people have neighbors and noise, and it's the city. It's like it's always like something's going on. Speaking of that piece, it's like it is actually based on sort of a true story, because like there was a neighbor with like a really loud car, like, and like the thing is like I live on the first floor and then the garage is below us, right? So it's like right there. And so like me and like that this entire floor, actually the first floor, like we could hear the car underneath. Like it was like obviously modified to have it be like as loud as possible. And like at first it was sort of like normal-ish like sounds, and then like they were making it louder and louder, clearly modifying it so that it would get louder and louder over time. Like you would see this guy just like working on his car just randomly in the garage, and I'm like, I know what you're doing, and I despise it. Like I despise it. Like I don't know what to do, but I cannot with the fact that you're actively making your car louder every time I see you. Like, and so like I was just so like frustrated by that. And I know my neighbors were also frustrated, because I have a neighbor that like we do little favors for each other, and like, when we kind of like are like, if there's something happening in the apartment, we kind of like talk about it, or like we have a contact. And she was like also saying like it's so loud and it's so hard to sleep, because like she's also a light sleeper and she has to wake up super early in the morning, and it's like it's just not okay, right? But then at the same time, what do you do, right? Like how can you, I mean, there's like ways to file complaints, I think, depending. But basically, that was like the story of that guy who like had like a really, really loud car. But like after a while, I don't know what happened. I know there was like some sort of like drama with like him and like his own landlord, because like where I live is a condo. So like each unit, it has its own landlord, right? Because they're owned separately by like different people. So it's kind of a different situation where it's like how do these things work? It's not the same as like an apartment where you have like one point of contact where you can like lodge a complaint. And so yeah, and but eventually he did leave. But there was also like a really random incident with that guy too, like afterwards, which like I don't know if I'm like, he was weird. He was really weird, because he came by like apparently after he got like kicked out or whatever happened to him, right? Like he like left, and then like a little bit later, my neighbor that I have contact with, she said that she saw him outside of the apartment just staring like in his car and just like glaring at the apartment like it did something to him. So like that was just like I was just like, okay, I don't know what was up with that guy, but clearly he was like pouring something into his car in terms of like his emotions or whatever stressors or whatever he thought. I guess he thought this was a cool hobby. It was not cool for everybody else though, because it was just so annoying. But he's gone, but he had a weird attitude and vendetta against him. I don't know, maybe the landlord. But yeah, so that's sort of the yarn about about like the story behind that story. So yeah,
The
strange.
ghost of the engine still sounds in the morning.
No, like oh, a nightmare because I'm like, why is it every night you could hear that car like underneath? It's almost like vibrating in through the apartment complex. That was how bad it was. So I'm just glad he's gone and we don't have any more loud cars. People into loud cars. Like fingers crossed, knock on wood, please.
Well, me and my friends used to like cars, and we used to go to like those speed zones, where they have the little walk carts, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
when you go there, there's also people who bring their own like fixed cars and things like that just to
Yeah,
come and
yeah.
talk about it or whatever. And I had my crappy car. Well, it wasn't mine, it was my dad's, and was taking it there to bring my friends to go walk kart, right? But the
Yeah.
car was just suddenly just broke down. It was sounding like because the exhaust broke, and the guys at the parking lot like, ooh, they thought it was modified, and they were stepping aside, thinking, oh, this car is a sleeper. It's like it has a big engine or something inside, and no, it was
Oh
just
gosh.
broken.
That's funny. That's funny. Yeah, I got a little self-conscious about the sound of my motorcycle after I changed out the exhaust on it, but man,
Ooh.
in the end, I'm not that
But
loud.
well, you are. I mean, motorcycles a lot, but they have a reason for being, so people will know that they're behind them or something. So
Mm.
at least you can hear them. Not excusing you, but that's a purpose.
Not excusing you. You should be held accountable for having a
Just put a
motorcycle.
potato on behind it. Silencer.
Because yeah, like
No,
motorcycles are okay because as long as you're just driving it and then like you cut the engine and you're done, right? But then like with that guy, he was just like just testing it all the time and like making the car sounds like all the time. And it was late. It would be like late in the night when he would be doing this. Very random hours. So obviously that's really not great for the neighbors.
yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds rough. Um, and it's actually, I think, even creepier what you said about him coming back later and being,
Yeah, like why are you here?
yeah,
What's up with you? Like, it was very odd. That guy, something was going on with that guy. We still don't know. And that place, I'm pretty sure that unit, like, still hasn't, like, I don't know if it's been sold because nobody lives there right now. And nobody's lived there since. So that's
Dun
even
dun
weirder.
dun dun.
So
yeah,
I don't know, like, what's up with that unit. They renovated the crap out of it because you can kind of see that from the outside because it's near the windows outside. But like, I know that the owners wanted to probably sell it or do something, or maybe it was sold and they renoed it, but then nobody's moving in. I really don't know what it is, but nobody's lived there after.
that kind of makes it even creepier. Ew.
It's extra weird, right? Like
Yeah.
something's up with that unit.
That's where you get the best writing from,
That's where you get
Life
because
life has good
regularly,
like
yeah,
good material.
like what is it like? Kind of triggers some like inspiration from like like just speculation, basically. Yeah,
Yeah, totally. Which actually kind of does bring me to one of my questions for you because
yeah,
I had the pleasure of laying out your book before it went to print and before we published it. And as I was reading your stories, there were several of them that had a real creepy factor to them. But,
mm,
one of them in particular really stood out to me. It was the one about the little girl that suddenly sees
yeah.
another
Found
one.
this. Yeah,
Yeah, and the narrator, it like switches between narrators, and that was a great technique that you don't see
mm,
all that often in literature.
mm.
But
I
I was always curious to have this conversation with you. But what was it that really inspired that story? Because there's some things about it that explore like mental health, um,
yeah,
and other things related to like hoarding.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah,
which my grandma, may God
yeah,
rest her soul. I loved her, but she had issues with hoarding. Um,
yeah, yeah.
but
It's
like
very common, actually.
yeah,
Yeah. Mm.
yeah. But I'm curious, like, what inspired that story because it really had a strong impact on me personally.
Mm. Yeah. I think I like it's sort of a personal note, but like I grew up and like it's interesting because like I grew up with a single mom, and my mom wasn't like, she was like constantly working, and I don't think she really had like the tools to like kind of like clean up and like be more organized, because she was more of a hoarder too. And so like that experience I think had always like had this like impact on me one way or another. And then like I realized like, because I grew up on TV, and or like, you know, grew up like watching TV, and I watched this show called Hoarders. And like that's like when my mom also realized, and I realized like this is like a very, like it's not, well, the show itself shows extreme cases, but it's like a very common thing. Like people have attachments to items. They have hard time like organizing or throwing things away, or you know, like just in, it's usually like a response to trauma, right? So like I was like I was like, well, this is kind of like a big thing that I have familiarity with. And it's something that I think has a lot that you could write about, because there's just like, it's like the idea of it is like, genuinely there is like horror in it, but then at the same time there's a lot of like ways to like think about like why someone is in that situation, or like thinking about like the people affected by it, like children, you know, especially, or even pets I know get affected by this quite frequently. And like even one of my favorite teachers, I believe, like I've never, like my favorite teacher from high school, actually, he was my dance teacher because I went to a performing arts high school. I knew he was a hoarder, like just from like some parts of like what I've seen of his like he had like this little office area that's supposed to be an office. You open it, there's like a bunch of stuff in there and can't really access it like at all. So I like knew like he probably was one too. And I was like, this is quite common but not really written about, you know, it's not really like represented even in media. I think like people will have mental health issues, but then their house will always be neat, their house will be clean usually, or like it's not something people address, like because there's a lot of shame surrounding it too. And so like I wanted to write something about like the actual like intense feeling surrounding this like common but like not very talked about condition, I suppose, that people experience all the time. So yeah, I wanted to kind of touch on that, and also like uh especially for the child character, who is the one kind of trying to like carve out in some ways like some like space for, you know, herself. It's like I think that's also like a character that I feel is like meant to kind of assuage like my childhood self also, right? Like me trying to like live in like the mess basically that I lived in, and like still trying to do my best. And I think like I wanted to write something about that. And I think it might also be quite relatable to some people as well, even though it's more of a surreal and kind of mystery, almost like crime vibes, like within the story. I think like ultimately it was just like, it was just something I wanted to write, like partially for myself, but like for other people, like who've like experienced something similar. But put in like a more like dramatic way, and through the lens of a child who's just trying to cope, right? Like that's what I also wanted to achieve, is like what is the child seeing by trying to cope with like the horrors that are happening within the house that she cannot really tell people about. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that definitely sounds like what I experienced in reading the story, and then I can definitely see some of those parallels in being around my grandma, you know, and she was the one that more or less raised me because my parents were always working. So just like you, I was raised by TV and my grandma, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Basically.
yeah, which I
And the
guess
Rosa de
internet for
Guadalupe.
me also. The internet
that's true.
was
Yeah,
fun to
yeah,
grow up on.
yeah. I didn't have access to the internet until I was much older, but yeah, I could see that.
There weren't even phones back then.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah, I remember using the internet when you had dial-up basically. And that was fun. You couldn't be on the phone. If you were using the internet, people couldn't call you.
Yep, yep. Yeah, I definitely remember that. We even ended up getting like a second phone line just so that, I could do homework for college.
Oh
Um,
wow.
yeah,
Oh wow. Yeah.
that's,
That's how we roll.
I know we're old, Abraham.
Those were different times,
Yeah,
we couldn't do now everything is connected.
or
Too connected perhaps.
yeah, yeah.
And talking about times, I also noticed and you kind of mentioned it already, you have a dancing background. So my
Yeah.
question is, Jamie, what kind of music does Jamie dances to nowadays?
Oh
What's
my
a cool
gosh. I
music that
wish I
you?
were. Honestly, I feel like the most dancing I've done, mostly like in my like sort of adult years, is like going to the club.
There
So
you go. There you
whatever the
go.
club is playing, that's what I'm dancing to. But these days, I don't really go to the club. So I'm mostly, in terms of music, like mostly recently been. It's interesting because, okay, before I like say what kind of music I listen to, I've been like, when I was younger, like K-pop was always a thing, but I like hadn't really been interested for whatever reason. I think I like it's kind of complex because I think I was like sort of resentful of my own people, but then like at the same time, like, I'm like, I don't want to be like it's me, I don't want to be like other people, like kind of thing. But then like whatever, I was listening to other things like probably pop mostly. But like I think like growing up like now as like an adult, I'm like appreciating the genre more. And like I have so many like nostalgic connections to K-pop and or like Korean pop in general because it was like kind of a big thing in the 90s when I was still like in Korea at the time. So I'm like, like I like got back into K-pop for a bit, like the more recent like things. And oh, like this is really random, but like back in January, I got really into Michael Jackson. Um oh my gosh, like I like fell into a rabbit hole. Thank you, YouTube, for putting me on again because
The
like
algorithm is working.
I was like getting random Michael Jackson recommendations, like, and I was like, because like Michael Jackson's not my time. Like when he was like really, really like at his like peak and like his peak popularity, that was not when I was like alive enough to like enjoy, basically, because I was just born in the 90s and things like that. So growing up, I think like I didn't really appreciate his sort of musical gifts and like the sort of impact he had on like modern pop in general. But I'm in my 30s now, and I was like listening to Michael Jackson songs. I was like, this is incredible. Like he's just like an incredible like sort of legendary performer, singer, songwriter, just everything. So I was just like in that rabbit hole for a bit. Really, I mean, I think like still after like all of the listening I did, Billie Jean is still like at the top for me in terms of like his songs. I think that song is just such a vibe. I love also the fact that he incorporated so many like horror elements to his songs, which I just felt like this is so new and so different even now. Almost like the horror elements of it's like kind of campy, but then it's just like so good. So I'm just like I just like was really into Michael Jackson for a
That's
bit. So
why
I
he's
just
the
go into
king.
like phases, as you can say. Like I'm like I get into like a spiral of things. But yeah, so
Yeah,
it's just been
me and my
good
friends
time.
go to like this arcade. It's called
Yeah.
a barcade, nowadays. All the kids can drink now, so you can go drink and have arcade moments. So there's
Yeah.
this video game about Michael Jackson, right? Like he's
Oh,
and so every time he does like a power, me and my friends do the Yes. Oh my god, so much fun with that game. And
Oh my
so
god.
again, going back to like people give so much crap to pop music, but the thing is with pop
Oh
music,
yeah.
it's a era that you live with a lot of people. Is it
Mm,
gets us that
yeah.
connection that we all know, woohoo, you know? So it's
Yeah.
exactly with all the songs, we had a moment in history that we lived together. And that's what attaches to like saying with K-pop. We like, even though you may say it's cheesy or whatever, but you had an experience culturally with that song and the pop. That's how it works, right? So
Yeah.
that's what I
And
say.
there's a reason why the songs are popular too. There's a reason why it speaks to the masses. So I never look down on pop music because I feel like a lot of my nostalgia, a lot of my memories are surrounding like pop music, like certain songs like that I didn't think about back then bring me back, immediately to that time. So it's such a cool way to like mark different like eras that you've lived through, basically. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I actually recently read a quote that I think I might be wrong, but if I remember correctly, uh, it's attributed to Mariah Carey, who in the early 90s, mid 90s was obviously a very popular artist. And
Yeah.
if I remember the quote correctly, Mariah Carey essentially says that pop is not a genre. And I think that that's accurate in the sense of like musically, it's maybe not a specific genre, but it is a unifying genre of music, right? It's a unifying type of music. I mean, hence the word popular, right? Pop being short for popular. And I think
Yeah.
that that's a really astute observation, Um,
Yeah,
because
that's what they have: pop country, pop rock, and
yeah,
music, K-pop.
Yeah.
It just has an extra thing that makes it like pop. And
Yeah.
again, it borrows from all different places, and it becomes
Yeah.
this huge thing that
True. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
connects us, I guess.
it's funny
Hmm.
that you would actually call out in Michael Jackson's music, maybe more so in his music videos, the horror elements.
Yeah.
And I don't know if people have picked up on it yet, but your writing does have these elements of horror and creepiness associated
Yeah.
with them. And I'm curious to hear from you, like, what is that sort of like affinity that you have with horror? How did
Mhm.
that come to be?
Oh, that's interesting. That's a cool question because I think I've always kind of lived in that mode, if that makes sense. Because, like, I remember I don't know if it's because I'm a contrarian or like what it is about me as a person, but like when I was young, like quite young back in Korea still, so I was still like, what, like 5, 6. I remember like really, really loving reptiles. Like reptiles were my whole world. Reptiles, dragons, anything like scary looking. Those were like my favorite things ever, basically. So this is like it's gonna be another tangent, slight tangent, but um like this we all know the Disney film Sleeping Beauty. Right. And like I'm pretty sure a lot of people have watched it. There's magnificent what is it?
Maleficent,
What's her name? Maleficent. I was like magnificent. That's not
close
correct.
enough. Close enough.
Maleficent. Maleficent, the character was just like such a cool figure to me. And like also like just because she turns into a dragon and I love dragons so much. I was just like really into the art and like just the kind of immense figure of the dragon. I was really upset actually when the prince kills the dragon because that's what happens. Spoiler, Prince kills the dragon with a sword. And like that part got me to literally my first piece of fan art, okay, was to change the ending so that the prince falls off the cliff and dies basically, and the dragon
Okay,
wins and
Jamie, you went dark.
Maleficent wins. That was like my first piece of fan art, only because I wanted the dragon to live. Like that was like my sole thing. And so like I've never subscribed to the sort of like mainstream like way they would tell me stories, like, because presumably if I'm a child that's being like shown this, I'm like supposed to root for the prince. But I was like, but the dragon is so cool. I want the dragon to win. Like, and so I've always kind of had an affinity, not just like in terms of horror. That's like where my mind has always been, is like, why does a figure, or why does a character receive hate? Why are they not liked? Like, these are things that have always been in my mind. Like, what is up with that? Basically, like, what I'm more sympathetic, I guess, like, to why somebody is a villain, not like necessarily like judging for being a villain, right? Like, there's just, I think villains just have like a rich, like, sort of multifaceted, like, way of like being a villain. Of course, some villains are just villains. They just suck, and like they're just not great people. But like, I just like the sort of like investigation into why things are the way they are. That's always been like how I've like thought about things. Never have I really been like one to like watch even Disney films. I'm watching it and I don't really like, I don't think I was like moved by the sort of like clean, everything's fine like storytelling, because that just felt to me in my heart that that was not the reality. And like, so like I've always like enjoyed um thinking about what makes things scary, why that's scary, and like, just like, I think the unknown especially is the scariest, right? That's, to me at least. Like, people find a lot of things scary, maybe different like fears depending on the person, but like for me the unknown and the mysterious are always like the most scary. And like you can't, things that are not tangible, I think, are just scarier. And so I just enjoy working with that, because there's just so many emotions you can like evoke through just the unknown. And so so my book Disappearing from View, for example, as an example, I like made that the title because when something disappears from view, whatever it is, you will never be able to get closure on that front, and you will not know, and you have to live with that. And I think like just the idea of that was like kind of threaded throughout a lot of the works in my chapbook. And so I really I really kind of liked that. And also it is a phrase from one of my pieces from the chapbook also. So I just thought that makes sense. Like, there's something so odd and strange and horrible happened, and you can't do anything about it. That's like the feeling I wanted to evoke. And that's always kind of like where I dwell. That's where things are really exciting to me, because there's just so much that can happen and you wouldn't know. Even right now, as we're like recording this too, is like there's so many things that are happening you wouldn't really know, right? And so I just think there's just something very fascinating about that. And horror as a whole also reveal a lot of like truths. Like, it's always about the truth that is like horrifying too. It's never something that's like fake. It's always the truth that is horrifying. So it's just something really liberating and cool about horror that like brings to light what's always being kept in the dark. Yeah.
That's a fascinating study, I guess, on your part of horror. And yeah, I can agree with like the concept of the liminality of being there but not being there, or closure but no closure. That's fascinating. Wow.
Dark world.
Dark.
And yeah, the stories that we were mainstream were like usually black and white situation, and I think we have, as a community or as a society, we have started to see more of those gray areas where you can see more depth in characters and stories that are just not like, okay, he's just the bad guy or the bad monster. And I think they're progressing into, sometimes I feel like they want to make the bad guy the good guy, which shouldn't be also the case. It should be just understanding them, but not making it the good guy.
Yeah.
But it has
Yeah.
changed to that. Like even Disney has tried some other. I'm not saying they're super successful in that, but some other places that you can see more like Netflix shows and things like that, they're
Yeah.
definitely going for like the the richness of it's not just bad or good. It's just
Yeah.
like some
Like
weird mixture
great.
because life is complicated. And
Yeah.
talking about complicated, like you already talked about some of the writing that you have. It has a lot of horror in it, but also I
Mhm.
noticed that you wrote that it has also it's a little bit of a result of depression and mental health problems that you have talked about before. So my question is like, what would you say to people who are either planning on becoming writers or just wanted to try to get, some help for mental health? How do you
Mhm.
think that arts, maybe just in general, doesn't have to be writing, will help or helps people or has helped you in the mental health area?
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. So for me, writing has always been a way to kind of put into words like how I'm feeling, basically. And seeing it represented is just such a cool thing. And like, I think it's not just cool, but it's like it helps you process when you're in the middle of writing something about your mental health. And I know like in like therapy or like just in general, people like recommend journaling and things like that. I think, when if you're like in like a situation where your mental health is really affecting you, um I feel like whatever is going on in your head or like your circumstances, those are always like, in my opinion, this is like just my personal like ways of having dealt with mental health, like issues, depression, anxiety, what have you. But those are all things you can utilize to pour into works, whether that's art, whether that's writing. These are just experiences that you are going through personally that can always be utilized one way or another. And so I would personally also just like in general, like whenever I've been feeling I had felt really down, I think like my best method of like getting that out of my system would be through writing. And it could be just describing what I'm feeling, but oftentimes I've noticed that like when I'm feeling that way, there's almost a surplus of emotions that I feel like I need to like get out on into like a work, a piece, one way or another. And I think that's always been therapeutic. So I think like the best thing you can do really is to start anything, really. Like one word on the page, any word. And it's a way to kind of like see yourself represented in another work of art or like in another piece, even if it's not someone else's work. It's like you're kind of like look, you have the opportunity to kind of like look at yourself almost like after having written it. It's very interesting because like in my experience, like I would have written like some really random like pieces and just like forget about it. And then like I'll like revisit, like reopen the archives, like dust it off and like open it up and I read it and I'm like, I really had some like profound insights. Like really had like things going on at this time, like that I can like that I can like think back to. So in a weird way, it's also a way to like track your progress in terms of like what like maybe improvements or like life circumstances have changed. So I would just start writing like one way or another. And writing is, to me at least, like one of the most accessible forms of art because there's no real pressure, at least to me, like in terms of technique to write about something. You can literally say, I did this today, or like, um, this is how I felt today. And you've already started like the first thing. So I think that's probably a good way to start if people want to start writing and they're like struggling with their mental health. Getting it out is always better, especially if you don't have somebody else that you can talk to, especially if you're feeling super isolated. Um, Nothing on the page is going to judge you. Like there's nobody who will judge you if you write something. So that's like a really good way, I think, to get like the thoughts out that are constantly in your mind. Getting it out is a lot better in my experience. Yeah.
Yes, I noticed that a lot of people use it that way, like especially you're feeling whatever you're feeling, it just
Hmm.
takes you, right? You're just writing it. But
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
you turn into art, you kind of have to be introspective and you have to
Yeah.
start thinking the
Hmm.
whys and the hows. And it kind
Yeah.
of has to give you, some power of like, I understand it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
now I can see exactly, especially when you go look back, like, oh, this is what happened.
Yeah.
And this is how I progress, like you're saying.
Hmm.
So you kind of start breaking it down and start saying, okay, it's just not this feeling that's taking me. It has some causes. It has something that I can maybe do about it, or some way of I can mitigate it, or
Yeah.
just the pure
Yeah.
act of reflecting on it. It's just so helpful. Like I noticed a lot of people like in our classes, like, oh, this helped me a lot because I just felt it, but I never really dealt with it in a meaningful way that I feel like I understand it. I have certain control about it.
Yeah. And like I think it's like for me also is like tweaking the work that I've written out is also therapeutic because you're now like concentrating on something else, not just like the thoughts swimming in your head or whatever like things you're dealing with. You're like looking at it more objectively, like what have I written? How can I make it better? When you kind of like do that, it's like a good like brain exercise, figuring out like what sounds good to me and like how I could make something sound better. What am I trying to convey, right, with this piece? Those like sort of technical things that you start doing as a writer, I think is also therapeutic because it takes your mind off of like a lot of things while you're into that mode. So, yeah.
Yeah,
Excellent.
yeah, no, yeah, that's definitely true. I always tell people that at least with writing poetry, half of the work is done just by simply writing it out, but the other half is, in the editing process and, taking the heart of what you wanted to say originally and really polishing it and making it shine. And I think that in one of the previous workshops that you taught for us as part of the LA Transit series last year, you presented a little poem that was about, the transit system and, the highway system specifically, cutting through neighborhoods and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
In the new series that you're going to be working on with us, what do you hope to kind of teach people through that little series? What are some of the things that you're hoping to experiment with?
Yeah, I think through that series, I am hoping to kind of highlight a lot of the like histories because like we always like try to focus on like the neighborhood and the history and like why these things matter. So ultimately, I would want people to walk away with like something new in terms of like some historical like landmarks or like things, incidents maybe that they weren't aware of. Um, Being able to walk away with like some of that information. And then at the same time, like getting people to kind of think a little bit deeper about what it means to kind of live somewhere. I think like it's just like it's one thing we just kind of like it's one thing where we kind of like just live our lives like on a day-to-day basis, but it would be cool to just have people be able to get a little bit introspective and get a little bit more in tune with like the surroundings that people don't really um, think about. People might maybe pass by it all the time and never really gave it a second thought. But I think like being able to walk around and kind of look at things and then being like writing something or like getting something out of it and then writing about it, I think can like really ground you and kind of really give you a different perspective about like just where you are situated in the world in general, I think. So I hope it would be something among those lines. And there's just like kind of inspiration you can find pretty much anywhere. Like, so I think if the walking tour um happens to like touch on something that you didn't like the participant didn't really like think about, that would be a good way to like just spark maybe inspiration for writing a piece or just getting something started. So I'm really hoping that it just gets people to think essentially and like write about something, even if it's not like super polished, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of like, I don't know about you guys, but like, have you ever had like you have a route to your house or to your school or to your job, and you know the fishing route, right? You know the one that goes faster, but then you look to the left and
Yeah.
I never been to that street. You turn
Yeah.
and you find
Yeah.
something really cool somewhere, right?
Yeah.
So I like that,
Yeah.
and I used to do it before photography, but photography helped me like to stick more into like deep, like looking deeper into things, right? So maybe I find something, then I research like, oh,
Yeah.
this used to be a hotel, blah blah blah, and so on. It's so every place that you're saying like has a story, has little secrets
Yeah.
hidden there.
Yeah.
You just have to be patient, and you have to be, you know, work sometimes a little bit for it, and definitely it's
Yeah.
gonna be worth it.
For sure.
Yeah, and it's always a complicated history too, especially in LA. And I hope we can kind of like, you know, bring to awareness some like historical aspects that maybe people just weren't aware of. Yeah.
Yeah, and for anybody that is listening or watching now, the workshops themselves, we are, calling them LA Time Capsule is obviously, it's a way to support Art Block Zine for anybody that is interested in submitting to both Art Block Zine. Y'all are welcome to join us for the workshops. They will be happening here in LA. So, this is going to be probably most accessible for people that are in the city of LA now. But we're going to be doing two separate walking tours in Boyle Heights, the neighborhood of Boyle Heights near East LA. That's going to be happening on Saturday, the 29th of March and the 5th of April. And also, we will be offering two walking tours and mini workshops in South LA, happening also on Saturdays, the 12th of April and the 19th of April. Right now, you can actually go to our website, distillarts.org/creative impact, and you can see a little bit more about the workshops themselves, and you can register now. Space is limited, so we highly recommend that people register for the individual workshops now, as opposed to waiting until, a couple of days before. And Jamie, like I said, we're going to be obviously collaborating with you in the developing of the workshops. And I do think that it's going to be a lot of fun to do the walking routes ourselves to, kind of time them and that kind of thing. But when we first talked about the workshops and some of the purpose behind it, I had mentioned to you that we were going to be really looking at the contributions of immigrants to our communities because
Yes.
like you just mentioned, right? LA has such a complicated and multi-layered history. And in the spirit of LA Time Capsule, we talked about how every building is essentially a form of a time capsule for the different periods
Yeah.
of LA. But going more specifically to the idea of the contributions of immigrant communities. Earlier, you mentioned that you consider yourself like a one and a half
Yeah.
generation Korean. Um, how would you describe that? Because I actually also sometimes call myself a one and a half Mexican.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. So I would say 1.5 means that you were born in another country and then you moved to uh well, for me, I moved to the US from South Korea to the US when I was pretty young. So you're kind of like not second gen and you're not first gen, essentially. So like you're kind of that sort of in between. So that's why I call myself 1.5, because I'm like, technically I'm not first gen. I'm technically not I feel like yeah, and second gen wouldn't apply to me at all. So uh it's like I didn't come here like when I was an adult, like a fully fledged adult going like, let me go to the US. Like I just kind of followed my mom because I had to. And so that's what I believe most people consider 1.5 gen. But I don't know about you, Luis, like if that also applies in your case.
Yeah, in my case, I call myself 1.5 because my mom was actually born in the US and I was born in the US, but my dad is from Mexico. He
Ah,
immigrated as an adult. So to me, in my eyes, I'm like, I'm in between being first generation on my
ah,
dad's side, and then, on my mom's side, I'm technically like the second generation. Um,
oh,
but that's like a
okay.
relative thing because ultimately, to me, it's more
Interesting.
about our cultural upbringing, and like I
Mm,
just culturally speaking, even though I am an American citizen, I really always viewed myself as more Mexican than anything. Uh,
right. Yeah.
which
I
is,
think
what's
you
that?
know, no, sorry. Like I think, yeah, like I had no idea that that was like also an interpretation of like 1.5 gen. Yeah.
Uh,
2.0,
yeah, 2.0,
Uh,
2.0.
2.0.
2.0.
Um,
Do like 1.57,
yeah,
6.
all the different, betas that
Yeah.
And it's cool that you guys talk about it because like it definitely has to do with we inhabit in the same zip codes, GPS, whatever you want to call it, right? And still everybody has their own experience, and that kind of changes how we view the world and how we contribute to the world. And that's what makes this LA or United States so rich, is the actual variety of people and experiences and skills, because all of us learn different skills because of that background and that kind of brain that we have developed throughout that interesting experience. And I think that's something that we definitely have to cherish and share and put it up front and say, like, we are not less or more. We're just as worthy and we are just as interesting and fun. So that's a cool thing that we are, bringing up those cool stories of people and how we all end up in this case in a magazine or a scene, and express all that in a group, just as a single individual. It's kind of rich.
and in the end, all of us like Michael Jackson. So
Michael Jackson is one of the most unifying figures, like globally. Like to be honest, like I don't know if anybody, if anybody can surpass that level of fame.
Yeah,
He's
definitely.
genuinely known at every corner of the globe. It's kind of wild.
Yeah, definitely.
yeah, and that's a fact. I mean, my one of my very first cassettes that I actually owned, and obviously
What's
that's
a cassette?
shut up.
Trying to act like
I
you
know,
don't know.
I know. But straight up though, like one of my very first cassettes was a cassette. It was actually a Mexican version, an import version of Michael Jackson's Thriller.
What? We need to find this cassette now. I'm
Sounds
interested.
Yeah, I mean it's the same album,
Oh,
same
okay. I
same
thought it
songs.
was.
It's
Oh
not
yeah.
like it's dubbed in Spanish, but
Yeah.
the album cover itself is cropped in and it has writing in Spanish on the cover
Oh,
to
that's so
indicate
cool.
that it's a Mexican version, quote unquote.
Oh, I
Okay.
see.
So
But it
like
Because
was the
definitely,
same.
like you were saying, like it has reached so many countries, and I don't
Yeah.
know how, especially back then, how fast like these companies were able to translate or to make things happen. And I think sometimes it's just like whoever was able to make it happen and make it a little translation so people at least know the names of the songs. It's like how fast it used to work back then. It just nowadays it's just a different beast.
Totally.
Yeah. I mean, people in Korea like also were like copying Michael Jackson's moves like all the time. Like when he would be like his like, you know, like music videos, whatever is like airing on TV, people were going wild just like trying to copy his moves and things like that. Who
amongst us hasn't tried the moonwalk? Come on, guys.
No, literally everybody's tried it.
You find yourself in a smooth floor with socks, you're gonna try it.
That's a fact.
That's a fact. Oh, when you go bowling, also.
I'm telling you. Like, if he were born in the age of the internet, that would just be breaking records left and right, because he still has records that people haven't broken. Like, and it's the internet age now. So that's just that already tells you enough. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. It's very true. All right. Well, I think we're at probably a good point where we can start closing out today's episode. But before we do say our goodbyes, is there anything that you'd like to share with the Arts Fam? Maybe where people can follow you online and break some of those internet records for us.
I know, oh my gosh. So my Instagram that I need to get back on using more is at Whisper Landing. It's just all one word. And I think that's like the main like social media I have. I also have I believe, I think it was a link tree. I also have my link tree on my Instagram bio, so that will be clickable on there, with like my other works that I publish like on like different platforms and things like that will be on there. But yeah, like I really don't do a lot of social media, even though I've learned a lot about marketing. I need to still like get on it and actually market myself. That's on the to-do list for sure. But yeah, that's the main place I can be reached.
Awesome. And definitely, Arts Fam, we recommend Disappearing from View, published just recently in November of this past year on the DSTL Arts website. You can pick it up now. It is available shipping worldwide. And also, we highly recommend that y'all join us. Jamie, myself, and Abraham will be doing the walking tours in both Boyle Heights and South LA. Come through, check us out, learn some history, and create some fantastic art. Abraham, you want to shout out anything that you got coming up? Or
one last words for you guys. It's like, whoever is gonna come to these workshops, please do me a favor, bring the loudest car you can, please. The loudest car you can, even motorcycles, especially Luis, and rub it your engine all the way down. Yes. See you there, guys.
We're gonna turn
the
walking tour into a cruise night.
That's not really walking friendly, but okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Hey, we accept all applicants.
As all applicants, we will be checking.
Yeah,
pedal to the metal, guys.
All right, everyone. I think with that, we'll go ahead and say goodnight, say farewell until the next episode. Take care, everybody. This is Luis. I've been joined by Abraham and, of course, Jamie. I hope y'all enjoy the rest of your month. Peace.